Hello, everyone, and welcome to Penning the Past, Soho's ongoing lecture series exploring the stories behind San Diego's historic places. I'm Dean Glass, and I'm delighted you could join us today. Today, we turn our attention to one of the city's most storied and perhaps most colorful neighborhoods, the Gaslamp Quarter. Known today for its vibrant streets and preserved Victorian architecture, the Gaslamp has lived many lives, from William Heath Davis's ambitious new town to the notorious Stingaree red light district, and ultimately to the revitalized historic quarter we recognize today. Guiding us through this layered history is historian Sandee Wilhoit. As the historian and lead tour guide for the Gaslamp Quarter Historical Foundation, Sandee has spent over a decade documenting the district's evolution. She is a prolific writer, a key member of the Gaslamp Players, and a frequent contributor to the Times of San Diego, where she brings history to life through character-driven narratives. And if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat feature, and we'll get to those at the end of the program. And now, please join me in welcoming Sandee Wilhoit.
Good morning. My name is Sandee Wilhoit, and I'm the historian for the Gaslamp Quarter Historical Foundation. I'm here to talk today about a man with a vision, our founding father, Alonzo Horton. Alonzo arrived in San Diego from San Francisco on April 13th, 1867, almost 159 years to the day, and promptly declared San Diego must be heaven on earth. It seems to me the best spot to build a city I ever saw. Although it was a beautiful sunny day and he could see the outline of the bay, the peninsula, Coronado, Point Loma, and the islands, this earthly paradise also presented sagebrush, a few Indian huts, and many jackrabbits. Horton was not to be deterred, and this was not his first rodeo. He had previously founded the village of Hortonville in Wisconsin, population 2,623, which is still flourishing to this day with approximately about the same population, 2,711 the last time I looked. Horton immediately presented himself to George Pendleton, county clerk, gave him $10 to call a special public land auction, and long story short, when the auction, which was held 3 days later, was over, Horton had purchased 960 acres for $265, roughly about 27.5 cents an acre. He now had the land, and to this end, he set about creating America's finest city. Alonzo faced the same type of issues facing city planners today. Firstly, zoning and land use. Horton drew a map, and there you have it. Named the streets A, B, C, D, etc., and the cross streets first, second, third, etc. Initially, what we now know as Broadway was called Spring Street, as several wells had been dug there, but it became D. H Street, the center of commerce, ultimately became Market Street, and I became Island. The Grand Boulevard leading to the bay was renamed Broadway, and laying out his city, Horton created very small blocks. You see, he knew he could get more money for a corner lot, so he wisely made sure he had many corner lots, and this earned him the nickname of Corner Lot Horton. He then returned to San Francisco to promote San Diego, to sell his successful furniture and dry goods business, and to gather up his wife, Sarah Babe Horton. He did all this in record time. After all, he was already 54 years old. He had no time to waste. When he returned to San Diego, he was forced to consider his next issue, affordable housing. Previously, in 1850, William Heath Davis, a wealthy merchant and sea captain, had attempted to start a town by the bay. He had purchased 10 New England saltbox houses from Portland, Maine, to provide housing for prospective settlers, but did not succeed in his venture as he suffered great financial losses, $700,000. And that was in their money, and a warehouse fire in San Francisco. Horton purchased a half interest in one of the few remaining little houses from Davis, and in a most cavalier gesture, titled it in Sarah's name. They lived in it while the first of their 5 mansions was being built. The little house, and here you have it, the Davis Horton House, and now the headquarters for the Gaslamp Historical Foundation and a museum, is the only home in which Alonzo Horton lived that is still standing. The 5 mansions have been razed. The Davis Horton House was originally located at State and Market Streets, but was moved to 227 11th Street, where it remained until 1980. It is now located at 410 Island Avenue. While vigorously promoting his new town, Horton began construction of his first mansion, which he desired to be the most ornamental house yet to be built in San Diego. Oops, there's our house. There it is. This was located at 10th and G, and it was 1.5 stories. Its structure, heavily gabled, as you can see, with a front porch running the length of the house. It was lushly landscaped and considered to be quite pretentious for the times. It was called Cypress Cottage and later became known as the Gables. This was followed by 4 others, each one larger, more elaborate, and each one moving upward and outward to expand the city. And here you can see all of his houses. Started down here and ended up here. Each one also had an ever-expanding and more stunning view of the bay. Horton was heavily into the view, or the vista. When Alonzo was contemplating his second mansion, he started collecting trees, shrubs, and flowering and exotic plants. He planted them on what was to become the site of his next home, and that was 6 and A. However, for recreation, many of San Diego's inhabitants took a Sunday stroll, and what better place to stroll than among all this lush vegetation? Horton added benches, graveled walkways, and designated that land as a public park. It doesn't look like a whole lot now, but I guess they liked it. To grow his new city, Alonzo began a promotion campaign stressing the balmy climate, good for one's health, and beauty and opportunity for land ownership and business, marketing. In selling his lots, he always presented the new owner with a map, noting the location of his new property. His lot sold so rapidly that at one point he ran out of maps and had to draw a map on his handkerchief for the next owner. And there's approximately 12 of these cloth maps still in existence. He built a long pier at the end of Fifth Avenue to accommodate large ships and often traded property for services such as building labor, and he gave a lot to all the different religious denominations and even gave the city the land for a huge new public cemetery, Mount Hope, as the old Camposanto in Old Town was getting much too small. By 1869, Newtown, as Horton's town was called, had gone from a barren tract inhabited mostly by rabbits to a thriving town of 3,000. The first doctor, Dr. Jacob Allen, started his practice at 5th and F. The Wells Fargo Express Company opened offices. Oh, that's not it. There we go. And the Chamber of Commerce was formed. 50 citizens formed the Pioneer Hook and Ladder Company. On September 10th, 1869, Horton's parents, Erastus and Tryphenia Horton, arrived to make their home in San Diego. I guess they figured it was safe now. To attract visitors to sunny San Diego, in 1870, Horton built the palatial Horton House. There we go. It was in a 100-room brick structure, furnished lavishly with marble-top tables and washstands in every room. The furniture was Victorian, of course, walnut, lavishly upholstered, and the floors were richly carpeted. Water was supplied by a 55-foot well with a 7,000-gallon holding tank, and the rooms were lighted by gas pumped from a pneumatic gas works at the rear of the building. There were 200 feet of hose on each floor for protection against fire, although Horton assured his guests that his grand hotel was fireproof. Each room was connected to the front desk by a bell, and this was an unheard of luxury back then. And the Horton House was even ADA compliant, as 20 rooms on the first floor were set aside for guests with disabilities. The opening of the Horton House on October 10th, 1870, was a shot in the arm for this new city, and served as great impetus in bringing in new businesses, new residents, and many new visitors. To ensure that his visitors had a pleasant place to sun themselves, Horton set apart the half block across from the hotel and designated it as a plaza. He installed park benches, built a small fountain, and enclosed it with hedges. The original Horton Plaza was born. Tourism was truly on its way. Public health has always been an issue. And in 1873, Anna Schepper, a German immigrant, was granted the first contract from the Board of Trustees. There's Horton Plaza. And here is Anna Schepper. And the hospital room that is now in the Davis Horton House, because the hospital was opened in the very same house that the Hortons had first lived in. Nurse Schepper was paid $1 a day a patient, so she housed as many as possible in nearly every room of the house. She did this for 8.5 years with no running water, no electricity, and received much praise for her efforts. Every city needs a chamber of commerce with no running water or electricity, and Anna received much praise. Now, back to the Chamber of Commerce. Well, Alonzo knew that, his new town was no exception. They needed a Chamber of Commerce. So on January 20th, 1870, San Diego's first Chamber of Commerce was formed. And 1870 was a very busy year for Mr. Horton. Although he was the richest man in San Diego, he still kept his money in a bank in San Francisco. So, in order to rectify that, the Bank of San Diego was opened on June 9th, 1870, and it was located on 6th between G and H, now market. Of course, Mr. Horton was the first bank president, of course. The original assets were $100,000, which is quite a bit. To entertain the local populace and the ever increasing tide of visitors, Horton's Hall, on the corner of 6th and F, opened its doors on May 9th. The opening featured a grand concert and dramatic entertainment and was a benefit for the newly formed Pioneer Hook and Ladder Company, it's a volunteer fire brigade. After much squabbling back and forth, the San Diego Union finally agreed with Mr. Horton's prediction that San Diego would soon become the county seat. And on June 24th, 1870, they moved their offices downtown to 4th and D from Old Town. Being a firm believer in literacy and reading for pleasure, on February 7th, Horton sanctioned the formation of the Horton Library Association. It was anticipated that Horton would donate his vast collection of books, but instead he offered to sell them to the association for $1,000, a half of their value. He said payments could be made from the dues, which were 50 cents per month. Apparently, this did not sit well with the association, so they changed the name to the San Diego Library Association, and Horton kept his books. San Diego's first real library would not be realized until 1902, but it was brought about by another Horton, Lydia Knapp Horton. But something urgently needed in 1870 was a courthouse and a jail. Horton offered to donate to the city the block bounded by 3rd, 4th, Cedar, and Date, but Old Towners said it was too far away, and New Towners also felt it was inaccessible. But just as an aside, Horton was truly a visionary. As 60 years later, city planners presented the Cedar Street Mall plan. Horton ultimately donated the first courthouse. It was located on the blocks bounded by Front, Union, Broadway, and C, and the building, a classical revival style, was completed at a cost of $55,000. It was later replaced on the same site in 1890 by an Italianate revival structure topped with a bell tower. This was then followed in 1874 by the construction of City Hall, an impressive Florentine, there you go, commercial bank, courthouse. Well, I thought we had a picture of City Hall, but we'll find one. And it was originally called the Commercial Bank Building. There we were. We did have it. There's the first courthouse. And here is the commercial bank. Now, if you go downtown today, you're going to see that it's much taller because back there they built things, moved in, and then kept going. And prior to obtaining this building, City Hall was located in several rented rooms at Horton Hall. You can see they really needed a new City Hall. In 1870, Western Union was seeking a subsidiary in order to bring its line to San Diego. They wanted a guarantee of $5,000 within 3 years. Subscriptions were taken among the local businessmen, but the amount fell short. Horton came to the rescue with a guarantee of $5,000, and they reached $8,000 to return for half of the company's profits for 3 years. Western Union agreed, and on August 20th, the first wire was sent to San Francisco. The first Western Union building. There we go. was on the corner of 5th and D. As he was really, really busy and needed an assistant in 1870, Horton also hired his cousin's husband, Jesse A. Shepherd. Oh, here, no, come on, Jesse. There we go. Jesse A. Shepherd as his secretary, and he remained in that position until Shepherd's death in 1877. And he's not to be confused with Jesse F. Shepherd, the renowned spiritualist who lived in the Villa Montezuma. By 1871, San Diego had grown to a city of over 2,300 and boasted 85 different occupations. The majority of them were judges and lawyers. What a surprise. Is this a trend? The census of 1871 also listed farmers, miners, 22 physicians, 20 saloon keepers. This is a trend. One gentleman, only one capitalist, and one windmill builder. Horton's Wharf was completed, and San Diego was rapidly becoming a seaport of note. Commodities shipped out of San Diego included honey, olives, grain, and hides. Now, in 1871, Horton turned his attention towards public education. Every city needs schools. The first school was called the East San Diego School, and it had 12 students. However, by 1882, several schools had been built. The Russ School, named as such because the Russ Lumber Company donated the wood to build it, and it later became San Diego High School. Additionally, elementary schools were built. Sherman School in Sherman Heights, B Street School, and the East School. Several private schools also operated. Notably, in 1873, the San Diego Seminary was a boarding and day school for both boys and girls, was opened on 2nd between D and E Streets. In 1872, the San Diego Water Company was founded. Initially, water was drawn from artesian wells and reservoirs, but by 1875, the seemingly inexhaustible supply of the San Diego River was tapped. There were several pumping stations throughout the city to ensure that everyone was serviced. By now, Horton was being referred to as Father Horton. So he's getting a little older. And however, he was not finished. There were still other issues to be considered, which he addressed during the boom times of the 1880s. Another public utility has always been electricity, or initially lighting. Citizens depended on large windows, usually double-sashed, and light wells, or what we call skylights. An additional convenience widely incorporated into early structures, which you can still see today if you come downtown, were prisms. They were prism glass tiles, actually, and they refracted light towards the back of the buildings. They can also still be seen over the doors to the basements to shoot light downstairs. By 1881, gas lights were widely used, and by 1886, electricity came to San Diego. Of course, Father Horton was the first customer, and he electrified the Horton House Hotel. Shortly afterwards, houses could gain electricity within an 8-mile radius of the city. The first electrical company was the Jenny Electrical Company of Indianapolis, which bought out in 1887 by Elijah Babcock and his Coronado Electric Company. So then Babcock consolidated with San Diego Gas Company, and voila, the San Diego Gas Fuel and Electrical Company was born, or SDG&E. Soon, San Diego had 110 carbon arc lamps in the central area, which provided 29 miles of lighting for the convenience and safety of the citizens and tourists. Alonzo's town was booming. The population had reached an all-time high of over 16,000. Mr. Bell's telephone then came to San Diego in May of 1882, and the San Diego Telephone Company was formed. On June 1st, they had 13 subscribers, one-page telephone book. We can see some very famous names there. We see Horton, of course, Hamilton from the law firm, Horton House, Marston, all kinds of things that we would recognize. Well, they had 13 subscribers, and the buildings reflected the success of Alonzo's City by the bay and can be exemplified by the impressive structures that we still have along Fifth Avenue. 8th Street was changed to Market, as Fifth and Market was now the commercial center of San Diego. And the northwest corner was graced by the Bakesto building, our precursor to Horton Plaza and our first mini mall. It was built by John D. Bakesto. He was a physician from the Ventura area. And when it opened, it sported our first grocery store, Levi and Straub, San Diego Hardware, a post office, a steamship ticketing office, tailors, haberdashers, milliners, dressmakers, a ship's chandlery, and even an undertaker. And Dr. Bakesto left his project in the care of his nephew, George Hazard. He's a well-known San Diego name. This made Dr. Bakesto our first absentee landlord. Across the street was the McGurk building. Although it's best known as Ferris and Ferris. And it housed a hotel and professional offices upstairs and a large pharmacy downstairs. And Ferris and Ferris Pharmacy moved in 1898 and stayed until 1986. Now, Ferris and Ferris was the first pharmacy to be open 24 hours a day. It was the first pharmacy to offer home delivery and the last pharmacy to sell live leeches. And Dr. Peck, the night pharmacist, the 24-hour guy, he had a son, and his son's name was Eldred, and he really wanted him to be a pharmacist too and keep the family business going. But, like teenagers, his son had his own ideas. He wanted to go on the stage. So Eldred went to New York, and that didn't work out too well for him. So he came back and regrouped and headed towards what is now Hollywood. Well, with a name like Eldred, he didn't think he could, make it as an actor. So he took his father's name, and Eldred became Gregory Peck. And if you want to think about it this way, Gregory Peck used to deliver drugs after school. So you might say that Gregory Peck once delivered drugs or once on the streets of San Diego. Other notable buildings erected in the boom days were the Yuma Building, the Louis Bank of Commerce. She's known as the Queen of the Gas Lamp because she's so fancy. It's the most photographed building in the gas lamp. and the Nesmith Greeley building. It's right next door to the Louis Bank of Commerce. And of course, now all these buildings and all these tourists were causing a lot of garbage to build up. In 1885, San Diego established the Department of Sanitation, Sewers, and Scavengers. Before the department was established, citizens depended on cesspools. Garbage was collected and dumped at sea. Ugh. By 1889, 211,500 feet of sewer pipe had been laid, which encompassed 47 miles from the waterfront to 24th Street. The first paid fire department was established, and the city was divided into 6 districts. Fire Station Number 1 was located on the east side of 5th between C and D. Oh, but unfortunately, tragedy came to our founding father on May 17th, 1889, when he lost his wife of 30 years, Sarah, while visiting her niece, Amy Burley. In Washington, D.C., she was thrown from her carriage when the horse reared. She broke her neck and died instantly. She was 69 years old. Her body was returned to San Diego, where she was buried next to Alonzo's parents at Mount Hope Cemetery. Alonzo, who had also suffered from financial ups and downs, felt broken. Horton was now 76 years of age. He had been widowed twice, but he was still young at heart. On December 21st, 1890, he took as his final wife Lydia Knapp Horton. She was a widow and former family acquaintance with 2 grown sons. Horton continued on, fondly overseeing his beloved city and welcoming visitors down at the wharf and wearing his signature top hat. Before Christmas in 1908, Horton, who was now, believe it or not, 95, fell ill. On January 1st, he was taken to Agnew Sanitarium. He passed away quietly with a smile on his face on January 7th, 1909 at 11 a.m. His attending physician, Dr. James A. Jackson, said his last words were of San Diego. He asked to be taken to the sanitarium's rooftop garden so he could view the city. He had high hopes of the city's population reaching 100,000. Of course, it is now well over 1.5 million. Horton's funeral was held 2 days later on Saturday, January 9th at 2 p.m. This ended the Horton years as the city said farewell to the beloved Father Horton. He was a kind, generous, courteous man, both honored and esteemed for his heroic vision. Thank you.
Any questions, anybody? Please put them in the chat feature. And thank you, Sandy. That was really interesting. I learned some new information about our beloved downtown San Diego.
Yes, and everything he started, all those buildings are still there. So, I hope you'll come down and see us. We give tours, I give tours, my colleague Jamie gives tours. We have some other tour guides, but all of those buildings, just like Father Horton, have really interesting stories behind them. They were interesting people. In some ways, we would think a little bizarre, but the stories are great and the buildings are beautiful.
Who was the first mayor of San Diego and in what year?
Oh, good one. I can't remember the year, but you know what they had to think of a way to do like city government because before everything was dictated by the state. So finally, um, Joshua Bean was the first mayor of San Diego, and he actually early on, before they were governed by the state, served from 1850 to 1851. And ultimately, later, they passed a law in the state that cities could become more self-governing. And that's when we got uh, like a city council in a sense. First, we had five people, and then they added two more, and they divided up the jobs.
We have another question. What was the major cause of the demise of the Horton Plaza Mall development? I don't know if
So
that's in your area of expertise.
Well, it's not exactly, but I know a little bit about it. And they said that they were not getting enough traffic as far as shopping. Now, as a downtown resident, and my late husband was a city planner, I really miss it. Everybody down here really misses Horton Plaza. It went um, in the last year into receivership. They held a public auction, but nobody would bid on it because I believe it has a very high uh, debt that that whole building um, process incurred, like millions and millions. And that has to be paid on top of what they're asking for, which I understand is fairly reasonable for a property that large. uh, but really heavily indebted. We are all hoping it will come back with retail.
Um, Somebody is asking where you give tours.
I give tours throughout the Gaslamp. I start at the Horton House, the Davis Horton House, our little museum, which I encourage you to come visit because everybody that goes in there says, "Oh, this is just like my grandma's house." And then the kids that come on tours always ask me, "Do you live here?" And I think, no. The fact that it doesn't have closets would be a deal breaker. But I start there, then I go up Fifth and go up to E, hook around by Balboa Park and come back. So I hit all the main buildings.
Does your association have a map of the remaining historic buildings that still exist in the Gaslamp and downtown area?
Yes, and you don't even need a map. All you have to do is walk up Fifth Avenue, hook over, and come down Fourth. They're all still standing, and they all look pretty much the same. Now, back when we first started, we did everything like Europe does, and they had like businesses on the ground floor and then, housing, affordable housing above it. But now, of course, the buildings are different. They're different types, but the buildings are the same because they're historic. You can't change the outside. So you see, in a sense, what they saw. And these buildings are beautiful. They're wonderful. I love to give these tours because I love to talk about the architecture and all the features. And again, they have such funny stories. So, yeah, if you want to do your own tour, if you don't want to listen to me, blah, 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 we sell a map, $2. You can do your own tour on your own time.
Um,
And I write about those buildings, and I've had to like I've been writing about those buildings like once a month for well over 6 years. So I ran out of buildings, and now I'm starting to do them over. But you can also get a in depth about those buildings if you just Google their names, and they come up. And the entire Gaslamp is a 16 and a half block designated national district. So they're all there.
What are the days and hours for the museum?
Okay, the museum is open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 until 5. But then we're open for private tours, on Tuesdays, and you can book those online. And I do a bunch of private specialty tours, as do a couple of my friends. My friend Jamie does a great one about businesses, booze, and buildings, and it's all about the gas lamp during Prohibition and some of the buildings that came up then. And then I do Wyatt Earp. I do women, both famous and infamous, of the gas lamp because the infamous ladies were a very big part of, our finances. They brought a lot of money into the city, and they were entertainment of sorts for many of our patrons. Um, Besides Wyatt Earp, let's see, I do the Women in the Gas Lamp every Friday. I do Ghosts of the Gas Lamp because, as you might imagine, all these buildings are super, super old. Yeah, they have spirits. So I acquaint you with them. And
Wow.
I recently did one for the Japanese internment in the gas lamp, during World War II. I even did one for Japanese architects who didn't speak English. And that one was really interesting because I don't speak Japanese, but we got along fine and they seemed to really like the buildings.
Are there any other things that parallel issues that we have today that they had in the 1870s or 80s, such as affordable housing issues?
Yes, and address that very briefly. Um, like I said, they practice that European style. And as you go through the gas lamp and I talk about the buildings, it's like I'll say this is such and such revival, so and so revival, because what we were trying to do is emulate them. So there was a lot of housing, what we would call affordable housing, and now it is used again as affordable housing on the upper floors of these buildings. Um, During the Panama California Exposition, 1915, we knew we were going to get a bazillion people in San Diego. So all these little hotels started going up like crazy. And many of them, a great many of them, are still in existence and still being used now for lower income housing. One that I am especially fond of is the Claremont, and that one, and also the Ideal Hotel, which I live downtown, so it's right next door to me. It was built for what they considered people of color. And, we were getting people from all over the world, and to them, that meant everybody who wasn't Caucasian. So we had to have buildings for them for that kind of housing, too. Uh, Now it's, you know, everything is integrated, thankfully. But all those buildings are still used, for the same thing they were used back then for housing.
Are you familiar with Arcadia Publishing's little book on San Diego's Gaslamp Quarter?
Yes, I am, and it's a really good one. I love that little book.
Great. Did you participate in the writing of that or?
No, I did not. That was before my time. But I have been there longer than anybody now. I've been there since 2009.
Wow,
I'm
wonderful.
like these buildings pretty old, but still standing.
All right. Looks like that's about it for our questions.
Well, I do hope they'll come visit me and come visit all my colleagues.
Great. All right. Well,
And thank you so much for your kind attention and
thank
your thoughtful questions.
thank you for the fascinating journey through the Gaslamp Quarter. And thanks to everybody for joining us today for Penning the Past. We've been so glad to have you with us as we continue exploring the rich and varied history of our region's historic buildings and places. Fans of Irving Gill won't want to miss next month's presentation when the Reverend Dr. Mark Hargreaves will discuss the distinct modernism of San Diego. And if you'd like to get more involved with Save Our Heritage organization, we are currently seeking volunteer docents to guide tours at the Marston House. Please fill out the volunteer application at sohosandiego.org or email us at sohosandiego@aol.com and join our awesome team of volunteers. If you're watching this presentation on our YouTube channel at a later date and would like to support our mission, please find the donation link in the description below. We also invite you to like, share, and subscribe to help us reach more history enthusiasts. Your support helps Soho protect and preserve San Diego's heritage through advocacy, legal action, and educational programs like this one. We hope you'll join us again next time. And until then, everybody have a great day. Thank you so much, Sandee. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.